tragic case of 6-year-old Arthur Hughes, trigger warning. Arthur was born January 4th, 2014 to his mother Olivia and his father Thomas. The pair were in a rocky on and off again relationship for several years, but by 2019, Arthur was living with Olivia and she was now dating a new man named Gary Cunningham. Now, Olivia and Gary were in a very violent relationship and they fought nonstop in front of her son Arthur. But in February of 2019, one of their fights got out of control and Olivia stabbed Gary 12 times with a kitchen knife, ending his life. So Olivia was arrested and sent to prison for murder, and Thomas got custody of their son Arthur. Olivia's family begged Thomas to please let them have custody of Arthur, but Thomas said no because he wanted his son. So Arthur came to live with his father at his grandparents' house because 29-year-old Thomas still lived at home with his parents. This was a big change for Arthur because he'd never been away from his mom like this before. So not long after Arthur had moved in with his father, his teachers noticed some very concerning behavior at school and they reached out to Thomas for a parent-teacher conference. Teachers said that Arthur was obsessed with murder and death and was fixated on the idea that his father was going to kill him or that his father was going to disappear from his life. So Thomas took Arthur to a specialist and the doctor said, look, this is normal behavior for a child who has lost a parent. Remember, his mom was ripped away from him when she was sent to prison. But what they didn't know was Thomas had been physically and verbally threatening to unalive Arthur since he'd moved in, and that's where these fears were stemming from. The doctor instructed Thomas to be patient, give Arthur some time. This was a big adjustment. Show him love and affection, cherish him, spend time with him, and let Arthur know that you're not going anywhere. So Thomas basically wiped his ass with the doctor's advice and became even more abusive and began punishing Thomas even worse. But Thomas didn't care about his son or his needs. He was too busy browsing dating apps looking for a new girlfriend. In August of 2019, Thomas met 33-year-old Emma Tussin on an app called Plenty of Fish, and the pair began dating. Their relationship moved faster than Dale Earnhardt, and he brought her home to meet his family by their third date. Emma had a long history of violent outbursts and attention-seeking behavior, like in 2013 when she threw herself off a multi-story car park because her boyfriend tried to leave her. Emma was known for faking pregnancies and miscarriages in an attempt to keep a man in a relationship, and she would often threaten to unalive herself if they tried to leave. Emma had 4 kids, but only 2 of them lived with her, so she lied to Thomas claiming she only had 2 because she didn't want him to find out about her past or meet her exes. Her ex said she had no maternal instinct whatsoever. She only wanted children for the attention they brought her as newborns and for the child benefits, but once the attention died away and she was left home alone with the baby, she didn't want them anymore. Her ex said that she hated kids, and that was why he took their kids from her, and she did start abusing Arthur right away. Within weeks of dating, Emma was overheard cussing Thomas out for buying his son Arthur a Subway sandwich because she deemed that an unnecessary treat that Arthur hadn't worked for and didn't deserve, and she wanted him to starve for his bad behavior. December 2019, Emma announces that she's pregnant, so Thomas proposes and the pair get engaged. But 2 weeks later, Emma allegedly has a miscarriage, but they still went on to get married in January of 2020, just 2 days after Arthur's 6th birthday. Soon after moving in with Emma and her 2 children, she claimed that Arthur was showing very violent, toxic behavior and that he hated her because she wasn't his mother. And every time Thomas would leave the house, she would text and call him, "You need to get back home. Arthur is acting up and I can't deal with it. He acts so bad when you leave this house. Come home now." But the truth was, Arthur wasn't misbehaving. Emma just hated being left home alone with the children, including her own, and it pissed her off when Thomas left like that, so she would start calling and texting to get him to come back home. And she would do this shit every single time he left the house. So in return, every time Thomas got back home, Arthur would get his ass beat for no reason because Emma was using him as a scapegoat to get what she wanted. And on a regular basis, Emma would text Thomas, "You have to send Arthur back to his grandparents' house. I can't stand him. I can't do this." But Thomas refused to let go of Arthur, so Arthur was stuck living with 2 people who hated him. Things were about to get a lot worse for Arthur as in March of 2020, the pandemic began, and Arthur would be isolated alone with his father and Emma, and nobody was there to protect him. Within weeks of moving into Emma's house, Arthur was severely depressed, anxious, and had lost a lot of weight. When they finally let him visit his grandmother, she found bruises on his back. Trigger warning, we're going to take a look at that picture of that bruise. Arthur's grandmother was disgusted and infuriated, so she immediately reported this to CPS and the police. But when the caseworkers came out to investigate, Thomas and Emma coached the children into lying, claiming that Arthur had gotten these bruises while horseplaying with Emma's kids. And the caseworker believed them and said there was no danger in their home, so she closed the case. But less than a month later, Emma's own stepfather called CPS and filed more serious abuse allegations. John said when they visited his home, they forced Arthur to sit in the corner motionless for hours and refused to give him any food or water the entire time. John said when he tried to give Arthur some food and water, Thomas stopped him and said he wasn't allowed to because Arthur had been naughty that day, and that was when he knew they were starving Arthur. John told the caseworkers that Arthur had lost a significant amount of weight since moving into Emma's home and that he was very concerned for him. John also reported that Thomas had confessed to him that he had beaten Arthur damn near to a bloody pulp, so he wanted to report this abuse, but sadly, CPS did not even investigate his claims. In April of 2020, Arthur's uncle Daniel contacted the police and showed them the pictures of his injuries, but the police decided they weren't going to investigate this case any further. School staff even contacted CPS on multiple occasions, but no action was ever taken. The abuse got so bad that Thomas and his own father got into a bad argument over how they were mistreating Arthur. And that was when they cut Arthur off from his family and school altogether. And that's when they began poisoning Arthur with deadly amounts of salt and what little food and water they did give him. June 15, 2020, Emma had a hair appointment at the salon where she took Arthur with her and forced him to stand facing the door for more than 6 hours of this appointment, not giving him any food or water. The hairdresser said the appointment was done in her own home, but she didn't call the police. She said she witnessed Arthur was malnourished, emaciated. He was in really bad shape. His hair, clothes, and nails were all filthy. He could barely walk. The hairdresser said at some point she and her husband were left alone with Arthur, so they tried to sneak him a glass of water, but he was so weak he couldn't even hold the glass or drink the water. So why the fuck didn't you call the police, you dumb bitch? While Emma's children had a picnic outside, Arthur, still in the same position, was only given a ham sandwich, which he attempted to eat, but spat out, probably because it was filled with salt to make it inedible. They came back the next day to finish her appointment, where they both stood over Arthur screaming at him before Thomas threw him in the car by his neck, where he collapsed. You're telling me they came back the next day and he was in worse shape and y'all still didn't call 911? Later in the day, Thomas dropped Emma and the kids back off at their house, and then he went back to the store to do some more shopping, leaving Arthur at home alone with Emma. As soon as Thomas left the house, Emma texted him, "Arthur is out of control. What do you want me to do to him? How do you want me to punish him?" And Thomas replied, "Just end him." Well, Emma took that literally because that's exactly what she did. Emma drug Arthur into the bathroom and forced him to drink a saltwater mixture, knowing damn well they had been starving, beating, and poisoning him for weeks now, and he was already weak, so she knew this could kill him. Well, because the salt wasn't working fast enough for her, Emma snapped and began physically attacking Arthur. She then violently shook him and began slamming his head into a hard surface until he collapsed and went unconscious, and then called his father instead of 911. 12 minutes later, when Thomas arrived home, they called 911, and when paramedics arrived, they automatically knew something was wrong here. Because the first thing Emma said was that 6-year-old Arthur was treating them like shit and was trying to fight her and screaming that she wasn't his mother, and then he began banging his head up against the wall and the floor. Emma lied to the police and claimed that Arthur was just out of control and that he had thrown her down the stairs the day before at the hairdresser's and that she was the victim here. And Thomas's bitch ass stood by her side defending her, claiming that Arthur was out of control and attacking her, lying on his own son to protect her. So paramedics took Arthur to the hospital where he was placed on life support and later died. And despite their many lies, by that evening, Thomas and Emma were both arrested. Arthur's autopsy showed that he had more than 140 injuries all over his body that were all in different stages of healing from long-term abuse. Police had a lot of evidence against them, proving that they had been abusing Arthur for a long time, including text and video from the home surveillance footage. Police found text between the two where Thomas told Emma, "Take his jaw off his shoulders, put him out with the trash, hit him in the head with his food, I'll take his neck off, dig Arthur's grave." On the day Arthur died, the home security footage shows Emma woke him up by snatching the cover off of him so hard he does a flip and slams into the floor head first, and then he can't even get up because he's so weak. The footage shows he's so weak from the starvation, abuse, and salt poisoning that he can barely walk. He can't even lift his pillow and blanket from the floor. The footage also shows Emma stuffing her face full of McDonald's as Arthur sits in the next room starving because they won't feed him. They're eating ice cream in the air conditioning while forcing him to sit out in the heat while starving. Arthur can be heard crying out, "Nobody loves me, nobody will feed me," while begging his Uncle Blake to come save him. That part broke me. Emma was pregnant again when she was arrested and tried to use that pregnancy as a get-out-of-jail-free card, but once she seen that wouldn't work, she terminated the pregnancy at 21 weeks. Emma was charged with murder and was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 29 years, but Thomas was only charged with manslaughter and only got 21 years in prison and could be out sooner than that. Emma's cellmate said that she's basically on vacation, having her cell painted, got a new TV, living the good life, and that she has shown no remorse for what she did to Arthur and that she only cries for herself. Now let's take a moment to remember 6-year-old Arthur Hughes. Arthur had a beautiful smile. He was loved by many. He was just learning to read and write, and he enjoyed school, his teachers, and his friends. Arthur said he wanted to be a superhero when he grew up, and his family said that his superpower was his smile. And Arthur loved football. Arthur's favorite football teams paid tribute to him by stopping the game every quarter and having the crowd do a standing ovation screaming, "You are loved, we love you, Arthur," and it was just a powerful thing to witness. Arthur was Nanny's baby, let me tell you. It destroyed her when she lost him, but she has been fighting tooth and nail ever since his death to stop this from happening to someone else. England has a serious problem with CPS corruption and child abuse, and too many child killers are walking free.